I'm joined now by Ugodre, Obi-Chukwu founder and chief analyst, Nairametrics, to review some of our top stories in more detail. Welcome to the show, Ugodre, and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Great to be here.
Great to see you. So one of the stories you chose was this news of the cancer warning on alcoholic drinks. I mean, at some point, we can't do anything. We can't live, we can't breathe. But this is based on a US surgeon's and an expert's view, who's probably seen cases. But the rebound effect was felt in the alcoholic beverages market with the stock and shares falling. What does this tell us about what the industry is going to look like this year?
I think it's just a lot of fear. People are a little worried. I'm like, no one saw this coming.
Okay.
And I think we've been here before with a similar labeling on cigarette.
Of course.
And so the markets didn't really know how to react. And so you had that widespread losses across alcohol makers, around the world. So basically, he's saying that look, alcohol, contributes about 100,000 cancer cases and 20,000 deaths in the U.S. And so he kind of thinks it's about time you have that label on alcoholic drinks. And guess what? Donald Trump doesn't take alcohol as well.
Okay.
He actually doesn't
Do
take
we even
alcohol.
know what that contribution is versus, say, nicotine and cigarettes?
I don't know. And not even that. I think to a lot of people, has it really worked with cigarette? Because, cigarette smoking is still on the rise. So it hasn't really reduced cigarette smoking. And so, yes, you can have that labeling, but really doesn't stop things.
So, given what you just said, it then looks more like companies concerned about litigation. And maybe in some cases that the doctors have treated where individuals may be saying it was because I drank this. And so this company is liable because they didn't give me a warning. So this could actually just become something that is a feature of the industry.
I really don't think so. I think it's more around, branding and some consequential effects that this could have that they really don't understand yet.
Yeah.
So for example, could you mean they have to change their entire bottling, their entire branding, and how their drinks look like? What could happen in other regions as well, especially in Europe, where Europe is very big on regulation? Could they pick up on this and then perhaps force them? So this could have different kind of effects on their bottom lines, and it's not something.
And of course, as usual, markets often react to news. There might be a correction later, so we'll see whether this actually really has a long-term impact on the industry. But sometimes it's confusing when people tell you drink red wine because it helps your
it helps your heart.
It helps your heart, and they tell you
it's
interesting times. Anyway, let's move to something that Nigeria's president said. This inflation target, which is a very grand ambition from 34.6 to 15%. How are we going to get there?
I don't think we're going to get there.
Really? Why
Yeah,
not?
I don't think so, because the funny thing was this was also in the MTEF, and that's what they use in the medium-term expenditure framework that they put out in November last year. And they had this ambitious 15% inflation target. They also usually have ambitious inflation targets every year. They had the same thing for 2024. We never got there. In fact, it was even worse. And so for us to go from 0.8 or 0.9 to 15?
34.6.
It's a tall order. Even if you freeze, fuel price increases and we don't have the sort of exchange rate volatility we had last year, I don't think we're still going to get there. Now, do I think we're going to see inflation taper down this year? Of course, yes, it's going to happen. That's also because of base effects.
Yeah.
And assuming we're not going to have a lot of volatility we had last year. But 15%, that's a stretch.
It is, but I guess every policymakers have to set a target. They're working towards something, and they might.
But
see
you got to set a target that's realistic.
Indeed, and interestingly, I saw the report on a WhatsApp chat group about money supply. We can talk about that, about the growth in money supply. Actually, M2. We'll talk about this a bit later. But again, it was a big announcement, fueling a lot of optimism for the Nigerian economy. And I guess in some ways, the president, leader of the country, has to have an optimistic view on the economy. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's look at this report that bank consumers have been feeling the pinch around not having cash to withdraw in ATMs. The CBN, of course, last year issued a warning to banks about ensuring that ATMs were adequately stuffed with cash. But were you aware that a lot of people had this issue?
Of course. In fact, we did a survey at Nairametrics and we surveyed a few banks and we tried to get cash ourselves. And if you go to those banks, they will tell you, look, they've told us, who told you, like from above, like we can't do more than 50,000 naira per person over the counter. And if you go to the ATM machines, there's actually no cash. So it's a bit confusing. So you really don't know where this is coming from. Because if you talk to the guys at the CBN, they'll tell you, look, we've instructed all banks to pay people, cash must be available, especially during the season. But if you go to banks, you actually won't see this cash. You can't even withdraw 100,000 naira like over the counter.
I know there have been restrictions on withdrawals, but the issue of not even having cash at all in machines is something that I know the CBN would really clamp down against. But this then brings me back to the whole cashless economy thing and the need to strike a balance between actually making cash available for basic things and actually ensuring that more Nigerians are onboarded through digital, for digital transactions. And I think we may still be struggling with striking the right balance there.
I don't even know whether I'm struggling. Yes, we are. But here's a fun fact. You go to banks and you go to ATM machines and you're looking for cash and you can't find it. But if you go to the regular POS guy on the streets,
then you get
you get all the cash you want. So it's kind of confusing, right? Yeah. So yes, there's a move. I'm for cashless society. But at the end of the day, we still have a policy that allows people to still carry cash. And so you got to make that available.
Yeah, and that's critical for small micro-transactions.
I think it's going to be one of the first litmus tests for the CBN governor, at least this quarter.
For this year. Yeah. Telecoms in Nigeria, it's been such a topical issue for years. I mean, we heard the story of MTN leaving Guinea, but I guess Guinea is not as important a market in Nigeria. We're hearing about threats to withdrawal services, to double tariffs and all of that. At some point, this sector needs to be deregulated from a pricing perspective.
Agreed. And that is one of the reasons why some of us think it's going to be difficult to have inflation rate remain at this sort of levels, because there's still a lot of prices that are still depressed. And telecoms is one of them.
Artificially so.
Artificially, yes. Yeah. So if you go look at our GDP numbers for telecoms, our inflation numbers for telecoms, they're currently trending at, I think, about 3% or thereabout.
Which is very low.
Yes, which is pretty low. So because prices actually haven't gone up for years. And so that is why they're calling for a 100% increase in their tariffs so that they can meet their cost of operations. And you're already seeing some of this load shedding, in quotes, happen. So there's some areas around the country where you actually can't get very good, network. Yeah. And it's deliberate. So it's not because, maybe the building's covering it, or it's actually deliberate because they really can't service those base stations anymore.
Yeah.
So now what a lot of telecoms are doing, remember, they are still reeling from the exchange rate losses of last year and 2 years ago. So what some of them are doing now are essentially ensuring that base stations can actually pay for themselves.
And function.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if the base station can't pay for itself, then you're going to have a lot of drop calls in those areas.
The truth is, we need more investment. I was talking about 6G technology earlier on the show with China, this breakthrough technology for China. If that kind of technology is going to come into this market maybe in the years to come, then it needs to be a space that is attractive for investment.
Agreed. But here's also what regulators will tell you. Well, yes, we agree, prices have been frozen for a while, but this industry is one that is not about price, but about scale. And if you go look at their EBITDA margins, it's still pretty high, probably higher than most other sectors. So they're still making a lot of money. And so why do you want to increase prices and put pressure on Nigeria? So that is on the regulator side. But as you rightly said, if you want to attract the right kind of investment, especially now that we're in an era where technology makes a difference between countries, you got to ensure that that sector is highly deregulated.
Indeed. Thank you.